I watched so you didn't have to. Right before we were about to do the Clay and Buck show, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas went on with the, I thought it was pretty crazy, went on with the ladies of The View. There were hecklers there screaming at him. They had to go to commercial break and try and get rid of the hecklers. But this, to me, is emblematic of where we are as a country, right? It's one thing to disagree with someone. It's another thing to argue that that person doesn't have the right to even share their opinions, and that is the argument increasingly adopted by the left wing in this country. I give credit, I really do. I give credit to The View for being willing to have Ted Cruz on, even though the vast majority of the women on that program disagree with the opinions of Ted Cruz. I have said before, I think Buck Sexton has said the same. I would go on The View. Like, I would talk to an audience that may not be aware of who I am or what I represent. I'd have a good time with them. If people want to yell and scream at me because they disagree with my opinions, so what? People yell and scream at me on my opinions on everything. Look, so people say, hey, you do more politics now than you used to because you got the biggest radio show in the country, which is primarily focused on politics, and that's true. And they say, well, how does that compare with sports? And I say, you realize that sports is made up of direct teams, right? And people take it personally when you pick somebody to beat their favorite team. People don't say anything meaner to me at all now than they used to say when I would pick Auburn or Alabama. The other side would be furious at me. Look, when you have talked about SEC football for a living, as I have, when you have written about SEC football for a living, as I have, there isn't anything that people are going to say to me that is worse than what I have heard over picking teams. You think talking about who's going to win a Senate election is tougher than talking about who's going to win a big rival game in state? Give me a break. People are way more fired up about the rival games. In fact, one of the most common things I get now is people of different fan bases who say all the time to me, I used to hate you when you would just talk about sports, but now you say a lot of things that are sane. Like, think about how crazy we are. I'm like the only person in sports who will say, yeah, dudes shouldn't be able to compete against girls in girl sports. Did you see this story from over the weekend of the volleyball match where they have a grainy video, but a dude who has decided to identify as a woman is playing women's volleyball, and he put a girl in the hospital by jumping up over the top of the net and spiking the ball with such power. And the coach of the women's volleyball team said he'd never seen a ball hit that hard in 40 years of coaching women's volleyball. This happened in North Carolina. So all these people out there saying, hey, are you paying attention? This is just exaggerated. There aren't men deciding to compete against women. This hardly ever happens. No. It's going to happen in your school district. It's going to happen in your daughter's competitive division. This is going to happen everywhere. And it's crazy. And it's completely bonkers. And I am the only person with a substantial platform in sports who is even discussing this issue at all, even though it's an 80-20 issue. Black, white, Asian, Hispanic parents don't believe that dudes should be able to compete against women. And yet, everyone is just pretending it's not happening and that there isn't a biological difference. Men are bigger, stronger, and faster than women. That's just the reality. Bigger, stronger, and faster. Which ties in, I'm going to get to the poll analysis here in a minute, but I just want to say this. Think about this for a minute. We know that inflation is at a 40-year high. We know that in many states, cities, communities, crime is at a 21st century high and has skyrocketed since 2019. We know that the border is more wide open than it has ever been before, and that there are more illegals coming across the southern border than has ever occurred before. On inflation and the economy, on crime, and on the border, Biden's a disaster.